Welcome to the Voices of Business, a Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce podcast. Nice to be with you. I am your host, Corey Nathan. My regular partner, Joshua Maddux, is actually on a SpaceX shuttle to Mars at the moment, but I'm sure he'll be back by next week. True story. Nonetheless, the Voices of Business is where we talk about business in the Santa Clarita Valley and beyond. And sometimes we don't just stick to business, we talk about leadership and management. You know what's funny is Joshua's, as I said his name, his screen just popped up. So that's so funny. He's piping in from the SpaceX shuttle. Anyway, we talk about leadership and management and life and anything else, anywhere else the spirit takes us. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Tell a friend, give us a good rating, and definitely write a review. All of it helps get the word out so more people can participate in these conversations, just like the one we're having today with Dennis Verner. My pal Dennis Verner is the GM of Burrtec Waste and is the co-owner and broker with SCV Commercial Real Estate. But my favorite designation for Dennis is he's the guy who's always wrong. Why is that, Dennis?
Well, I'm not really sure. I thought it was you that was always wrong.
Well, yeah, that's the running debate, isn't it? He really is a good pal. So I'm always glad to spend time with him and show him the error of his ways. In all seriousness, man, how you doing? Things good?
Yeah, doing good.
I'm glad to spend some time with you. I thought a good way to start would be to learn a little bit more about your background. Did you grow up here in Santa Clarita, or were you over in the Valley?
No, I actually was born and raised in Downey, California.
Okay.
So I missed the San Fernando Valley. I went straight from Downey to Santa Clarita.
At what point did you get up to Santa Clarita?
1989,
Oh,
July
wow.
4th. Again.
Okay, that's when I graduated high school. So you must have been a grown up by then. I know you were way older than me.
Yeah.
Where was that? Because when you were younger, I know like late teens in your 20s, you were a pretty serious musician. Is that during those days that you moved up to this neck of the woods?
Yeah, what was happening back then, I was playing in rock bands and all that kind of stuff, but I needed money and I was working at a company that manufactured trash trucks back in the day. I actually worked in engineering and warranty in different divisions. And they laid me off. And so I went out on my own repairing trash trucks.
Oh,
I was
wow.
around the Southern California and Southern United States repairing trash trucks. And that supported me playing in rock bands. And then one of my customers was Santa Clarita Disposal. I started working with them in about 1988. And finally, there's like, could you just come and work for me? Okay. So then I moved to Santa Clarita.
Oh,
And
that's cool. So you've been a trash man for quite some time.
I was born into it. My grandfather, my father. In fact, the trash trucks that you see driving around, believe it or not, the patent is in my father's name.
Oh, wow. We've known each other a long time, man, and that's the first time I'm hearing this. I didn't know that you were like third generation trash.
Yeah, my grandfather was there. He was a welder, and
Okay.
then when my dad got out of the Navy in the early '60s. He went to work and as a welder as well, but then he ended up working his way into engineering and designed the trash trucks. And like I said, then he ended up having a patent in his name of the entire trash truck. My sister actually just found it online the other day, so that's why it's kind of fresh in my mind. So it's kind of neat to see the picture of the trash trucks that you see driving down the street with the patent written in his name. So, and I helped actually design that parts of it when I worked in engineering. We didn't get any money from it. We got paid every Friday.
Yeah.
Patents, but the patents have to be in the designer's name, but the patents are owned by the company that made the designer.
Oh, wow.
We're not
That's pretty
military.
cool. So did you? So two questions. One is, I know you've stayed up with your music. You know, you play at church that we were going to together. I've heard you play out and about, and doing some funky stuff. But also, so I want to know about that. But also, where does the commercial real estate come in?
So when Santa Clarita Disposal sold and I worked 1989 to 1999. So it was almost exactly 10 years. They sold to Waste Management. And at that time, it's a long story, but I ended up working at a company that's up here that handled all the recycling for the city of Santa Clarita. And so I had to build the facility, secure the contracts, and I was doing the recycling for Santa Clarita, Glendale, and Simi Valley. And then that about a couple years later, it burned down, and so I ended up leaving there, and I ended up going back to engineering. I ended up as a design engineer for motorhomes, and I was designing some prototypes and working on that. Got them on AutoCAD and all this other stuff, and then that job ended up kind of finalizing with the motorhome industry and after 9/11 and all that kind of stuff. So I left and I was kind of looking for a job, and I was looking like, what am I going to do? And I wanted to buy a franchise, maybe a Taco Bell or an auto parts store or something like that. I'm like, what can I do that takes very little money to start, but you can get as much money as you want on the back end? And somebody said, oh, you should try commercial real estate. And I'm like, okay. So I did. And it's still going. In fact, this morning I was at the EDC with my wife, Pamela. She was getting the Power Broker Award for 2023.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah. She really is a power broker, isn't she?
She is. She's right up there with, CBRE and NAI Capital, and Collier's, all the big companies. So she's right up there. And it's funny because they were awarding all the teams, and then she's SCV Commercial. She was the only one, just a single sole person. It was kind of good. So
That is pretty cool.
That's still in what we've sold a lot of stuff out here in Santa Clarita.
Yeah. Well, I want to back up for a second because you mentioned engineering. Is engineering something you went to school for, or is that more something that you learned on the job?
No, I'm the school of hard knocks.
Wow.
I left high school early. I got my GED and just went to work at the factory with my dad. He was working in engineering. I worked in the parts room. But working in the parts room was interesting because I learned all the parts. And then when they hired somebody else they had this big project for the city of New York, they were looking for somebody in R&D, and I was out there, and I'm like, hey, I know where all these parts go. Ended up making the wire harnesses in R&D, and then I ended up learning how to make the schematics. And then the director of engineering came out one day and said, who's drawing all these schematics? I'm like, I am, sir. Do you want me to stop? He's like, no, tomorrow morning I want you to report to engineering. So I went and started working in engineering with my dad.
That's pretty cool.
My dad also didn't go to school either. He was in the Navy, so we're just guys that just learn how to do it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that sounds like, I mean, it's more of a Midwestern trait, or kind of like a farmer's trait. It's, if you're working in your trade, there's any number of skills that you have to pick up to really take care of your domain, if you will. So there are these things that folks get trained for, and then other things you just pick up along the way, especially with with your dad and your grandfather being in the business. You've been around these vehicles and around the equipment for so long. And you're a naturally curious guy, and is autodidactic? Is that the right word that I'm looking for? Would you consider yourself, or more of a Renaissance man, kind of a master of many different skills?
Yeah, what's a jack of all trades, master of none?
I think you've mastered a couple. So one of the other things about you is how involved you are in the community. Was that a conscious decision just to start getting involved in business groups and charities? I mean, between you and Pam, you guys are on the boards of I don't know how many different charities around town and business groups. At what point did you start getting involved in that, and what was the motivation?
When I went to work at Santa Clarita Disposal, my old boss, Steve Arkland, he was very involved in the community. And so he was, encouraged us to get out there and go to the chamber mixers and all that kind of stuff. And I was the general manager and vice president, and I had my sales guy, he was going to all those things. And then when they ended up selling the company, he was the first one to get a job offer. Nobody knew who I was. So I'm like, I think I need to get more involved in the community. And then that's when I started going out. And even though the jobs I had didn't really require going out into the community, I was just doing it for my own, just to get to know people and stuff. And that's actually how I met my wife,
Yeah.
was that chamber mixer. And then we actually, the first time we actually talked was at the Via Bash, and that was like 2006. So after being, I find it very valuable to be involved in the community, but then it starts turning because you actually start seeing, you're kind of there to network and all that kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden you start really seeing the cost of what these people are doing, these charities, and you
Right.
start believing in them, if they're, whether it's the Boys and Girls Club, it's the one we're really active, and you see how important it is for these kids to get out of the house and interact with other kids. My wife deals with the Circle of Hope. You're dealing with people who've got cancer,
Yeah.
types of things, and then you start really understanding, wow, this is way more than networking. This is, somebody asked us, they're like, what do you get out of this? We're like, actually nothing. I mean, it's a financial burden to deal with these. My wife, she'll be working on it. She works harder at it than I do. She'll be, losing real estate deals because she's so busy trying to put on an event. She won't have the time to call somebody back or something like that. So you kind of just get involved and you get in on the mission. That's basically why we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it is funny because you and I have been on the board together for the Santa Clarita Valley Business Group forever. We miss you, man. We miss your, you know, your independent voice in there. And then sometimes talking yourself out of your own vote, your own motion. That's a real treat.
Yeah.
But yeah, some folks think, oh man, they must be getting paid. They must be getting some sort of benefit. And it's no, we actually don't. We're just donating our time. I actually like the SCVVG as well as the Chamber, of course. I know this is a Chamber podcast, of course, but the SCVVG taught me a lot because it's a really well-run organization with a lot of legacy in this valley. It's gone back to the mid to late 80s, not necessarily as the SCVVG, but the core group has. And one of the things I've learned is what makes a really well-run organization, one of which is a really strong set of bylaws, but also the quality of individuals and a commitment to the group and the mission of the group, having clarity about that mission of the group. What have you found in serving on different boards in different organizations, different business groups? What have you found to be some of the strengths of some of the better run organizations and some of the proclivities, if you will, of organizations that haven't gone as well or have hit some hard times?
Well, there is a pretty wide spectrum. And if a board, so going back to the bylaws, you have to have the bylaws, but then you have to have people that are willing to follow them. And when you run into some of these organizations where they don't have bylaws or they don't have some kind of a mission statement and they're kind of all over the place, those are the ones that fail. And there's not much you can do because unless you're going to be the person who's going to take it over. And then sometimes there's egos involved. But most of the charities that we're involved with are pretty strong in the business groups. I'm on the board of the Santa Clarita Valley Economic Development Corporation. That's really a well-run machine. And I'm also on the board of the SCV Chamber of Commerce. And that has become a well-oiled machine. That's actually running really well. And then I like the board of the SCV Santa Clarita Valley Business Group, which I was on with you on the
Yeah.
board a few years. That one, I think like 50, I think I was the longest standing board member on that one, maybe 10 or 15 years. That one is pretty well oiled as well. And so when you start, you kind of take that for granted. And then all of a sudden you start running into we work with another charity, which I won't name, but it was pretty much a state of disorganization during the whole time. And it makes it really difficult, especially when you're trying to help the cause, and people are getting in the way, those kind of things. I don't know if I answered the question or
Yeah,
not,
you
but
did. You did. Real quick story. Uh, so when I first started going to Santa Clarita Valley Business Group, I'm kind of an independent guy too, and sometimes, you know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And pretty early on, it was the year that Dennis was president, and he invited me out to lunch. I had some kind of a conflict, not a major conflict, but just a butted heads a little bit with somebody else in the group. And Dennis invited me out to lunch, and I was absolutely convinced that Dennis was inviting me out. It was like taking me out to the woodshed. That I was getting kicked out of the group for whatever reason. And I brought it up to him, and he said, "You know what, man? I'm going to do even worse than kick you out. I'm going to make you president of this group someday." And that's exactly what he did. He, over the course of about 4 or 5 years, kind of showed me the way of how to plant some seeds and nurture relationships. And I think about a year, maybe 2 years after that, I got onto the board, served as one of the board of directors for about 2 years, became vice president and ultimately president. And I've been serving in the best role in the organization now for, I don't know, 5 years now, for as the past president. But I bring that story up for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's Dennis and I have connected on a different level for many years now. But also it indicates something about your leadership style. And I want to talk a little bit more about leadership. Number one, at what point did you decide to start taking on leadership roles? Or was it something that just happened organically and you realized, oh, wow, I guess, I'm on a board now. And oh, wow. Was it more of a conscious decision that you pursued? Or did it just kind of organically grow out of your participation in these organizations?
I don't know where it came from genetically because my father was not a leader. He One day I saw him doing something. I said, Dad, this is so far beneath you. What are you doing? You should go back to your boss and tell him. He's like, I get paid every Friday. If they want me to draw circles, he went back then we used vellum to draw the drawings. He's like, if they tell me to draw circles on vellum, that's what I'm going to do all day is just draw circles on vellum. I never had that. I was always, maybe I got it from my mom, just more even as a kid in school or whatever, if something would come on, I'd be the person that I would just take charge. Hey, we got to do this, get over here, let's do that, let's do this. I don't know where it came from, but it was probably natural. I never really made a conscious effort to be a leader, but I was in junior high, I was super shy. I couldn't even talk to anybody. I couldn't even order food at a fast food place. I could just stand there and didn't know what to say. It took me a while to get out of my shell.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's a lot of folks think that what makes a leader is a personality style, whether it's a type A personality style or somebody with like a dynamic, wants to be in front of in front of everybody and, likes talking in front of big groups or whatever. I don't think that's what it is, but I was curious what your thoughts are about, number one, how did you start to learn how to be an effective leader? Were there certain mentors that you had that taught you about it, or was it something that you learned on the job, books that you read?
I think you have to understand what you're trying to do. What is the organization trying to do? Take the time and understand that. And I lead differently because we do a lot of four-wheel drive trips, and I'll map it all out and set it all up. And even though I'm the leader, I usually follow. I'm the last guy because I
Hmm.
want to make sure everybody got up the hill, everybody got around the corner, everybody got through the sand pit or whatever, as opposed to being out there up in front. And that's just the way I try to lead, the companies like running Burrtec and the real estate company and all the jobs I had running Santa Clarita Disposal. I'm always the guy who's just kind of behind everybody. You're kind of, it's kind of a servant leadership. You want to make sure that your employees understand the mission, what you're trying to do, and they have the tools that it takes to do it and the support to do it. And And I learned that from the owners of the companies, I guess.
Yeah.
I've worked for some good owners and I've worked for some bad owners.
That'll happen if you've been around for a while. You're not always gonna you're not always gonna have what did Abe Lincoln say? You could please some of the people some of the time, and
All the people, or all the people some of the time, some of the people all the time. But you can't please
yeah,
all the
something
people
like
all the time. Something
yeah.
like that.
Well, anyway, the that's you do reflect some timeless principles about leadership. The greatest leaders are the greatest servers. The first among you shall be last, and the last shall be first, kind of a thing. I'm also curious when, like me, you've identified other folks and mentored them into leadership positions and supported them as they took on more leadership. What do you look for in folks around you, and in terms of identifying somebody who's a potential leader?
I feel that you could teach anybody something technical or how to do something, but you can't teach them how to be a good human. They just have to be naturally a good human. And if they're not a good human, it's hard to really work with that person, no matter how hard you try. And you can make progress. And being a good human, I think it's not always what you think. It's not always just like being I don't even know how to describe it. It's just a person who cares about other people, cares about the mission. And you could be outgoing, and you could be, aggressive and loud and all those types of things. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to focus on the mission, and then learning the technical parts of the mission aren't that hard. But it's hard to I've tried taking mechanics and turning them into supervisors and those types of things, only to have it fail because they're good at what they do. And being I always say there's only four types of positions when you work. You have your entrepreneurial position where you're the guy who's like, hey, we're going to do this, and then and then that person, people are attracted to that person. Then you got your sales, hey, we're going to sell these things. And you have your technicians. The technicians are the ones that are going to make these things or services or whatever. And then you have your managers. And a technician, a mechanic is a technician in my mind. And sometimes you can't convert them over to managers. And sometimes you can have a manager who doesn't understand the technical part, doesn't know how to work on a trash truck, but they're good at managing. And to find somebody that it goes both ways, but you have to really understand the person as a human before you can get into all the aspects of what they're going to do. And a lot of times they find that what I call their own watermark. So you may have somebody who's not a good manager, then get him out of that role. But he might be a great technician.
Mm.
In that you got to find what the person is good at. You don't have to just get rid of them. Just say, hey, you're not the greatest communicator, and propping people up and teaching them and leading that kind of thing. But you're a great mechanic. Do you just want to be a mechanic? And there's a lot of times they're like, yeah, man, that was so stressful, so much. Now I just so happy just come back to work. And sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes there's a great mechanic, but they're just like, I just really want to be a leader. So, and I don't want to sound like I'm stereotyping because I've had great mechanics turn into great supervisors. I'm just using that as an example, and I've had failures at it as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, you could look at sports too. I mean, Michael Jordan doesn't mean it was arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. Doesn't mean he's going to be a great coach or a great GM. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and then some great players around sports do turn into great leaders, or maybe on the field kind of leaders. Yogi Berra comes to mind. The other thing I was curious about, because you do straddle two very different industries, between the trash and recycling and servicing now an even larger constituency with Burrtec, but also SCV Commercial. Larger, bigger picture, the world has been through a lot over the last 4 years or so. I was curious, both in the real estate business and in your duties running Burrtec, how have you navigated through a worldwide pandemic and all these social changes, and how has it affected your jobs, the roles that you play, and how have you gotten through it?
Well, Burrtec is basically like a utility. So during the pandemic, we were issued letters that we were allowed to drive during curfew, or because we had to get to work. We had to have all the safety precautions, but we had to pick up the trash, just like the electricity's got to run, because we'd had a bigger problem if we didn't pick up the trash. The real estate was weird. I think what changed the world was Zoom.
Mm,
Zoom changed the world. In the pandemic, it was probably already around. I don't know the history of Zoom, but Google Meets and all those things,
yeah.
they changed everything. And but when I consulted for Burrtec for 10 or 12 years, from about 2000 or 2002 to around 2013, when I actually came on as an employee. But when I came on as an employee, I literally had to give up the real estate.
Oh,
And I asked my wife, because my wife had done escrow for 13 years and she just got her license. I said, this is all about you. You're going to have to take over the real estate. I won't have time to do it. And she was able to keep it going, because we had about 6 or 7 agents. And the work would always come to me for some reason. People would come to me and say, hey, I want to get this building, whatever. And I would give it to one of my agents, and then they'd come back. I'm like, well, hey, what happened? I'm like, well, it didn't work out or whatever. With my wife, for some reason, you give her 10 deals, she'd come back with all 10 of them closed. We ended up just getting, we didn't fire anybody, but we're just like, as they moved on, we just didn't replace them until we didn't have any more agents. It's just her by herself. She keeps it going. All I do is once in a while, she'll call me, hey, I got this issue going on. What do you think? And I'm like, oh, you should do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. But now she knows the market better than I do. She knows the listings better than I do. She knows the contracts. I understand the concept of the contracts, what the contracts are trying to do, but she understands the specific lines, the specific language. So every now and then we work really well together, because I'll be like, well, this is what the contract's trying to do. And she'll, oh, that's paragraph 41, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And that's how we end up doing it. But I am not in the day-to-day business. I know about almost all the deals that she's doing, but a lot of the deals she does, some of the deals, I have no idea that what she's working on. She's just out there, because she's also a real estate broker herself.
Okay.
So I don't even need to be involved at all. It's just we're too lazy to switch the paperwork to make her the broker. So I'm still the responsible broker for SCV Commercial, and I renew my license every 4 years. I have to go through and renew it and take all the continuing education and all that kind of stuff. So I'm up on it. But as far as if you're not in it every single day, that's where we run into a lot of residential agents are like, oh, I want to do commercial. I'm like, well, you can do commercial or you can do residential. It's not that it's harder. It's just you need to be doing it every single day. You need to know how much price per square foot is on retail, how much is it on office, what's the trend, what's the vacancy factors, what's the parking ratios for medical versus industrial. Why can't I put my chiropractor in the industrial park? It's cheaper over there. With your floor area ratios, or if you're developers, you got a curb and gutter and setbacks and easements, all that stuff. You have to deal with on the commercial side. It's completely different than the trash side. The trash side is, my job is to empty 220,000 trash cans a week in Santa Clarita with no injuries and no complaints.
That's quite a hurdle.
It is, but I have a lot more, I have 120 people that help me do that, and they're great great people to work with. So, but it's completely two separate worlds. I could, just go back into commercial real estate. I really get it and really understand it. I really like it, but the it's hard to have a husband and wife both on commission because either you're both doing great or you're both doing terrible. So having a job as a general manager flattens out my income, and then when Pam's doing good, we're wine tasting. When she's doing bad, we're eating top ramen, but we're not losing the house.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was going to ask a very general question, but you sort of indicated that I have to ask it in several parts. The general question would have been, where do you see things going in the commercial real estate market? The several parts would be, well, it depends. Are you talking about industrial? Are you talking about retail? Are you talking about office? There's so many different sectors that are moving differently and reacting to different factors. Like you mentioned, Zoom, I would imagine, has affected the office space. So I don't know. How would you answer that question?
Well, it's hard for me. I get to ask that question a lot, and it's hard for me to answer, and I'll tell you why. Being small, a small brokerage house where it's just SCV Commercial, and it's basically just Pam and I don't really do anything. It's just her. We're so small, we're not affected by market trends. If I was a big company like CBRE and I had a nationwide sales force with thousands of agents, and then the office is trending down and you have our office group is dying on the vine, we're just plugged into Santa Clarita. So no matter how the market is, there's always somebody that wants to sell their building or they want to buy their building, and we sold their buddy's building and they want to use us. So we're not really affected because Pam just sold, she sells office buildings, she sells everything, but it's just to random people. A lot of the stuff, she sold some building to some multi-millionaire guy who wanted to buy a giant building just to park his Ferraris. We're not really worried about trends and all that kind of stuff. It's just people just come and just like, hey. So we're not tied to it, but so I can't really answer that question, but I think that well, all the obvious signs this morning at the Power Broker Awards, they did a large presentation on the mall. This purchased by Centennial. Centennial was there talking about what they want to do, the new specific plan, town center specific plan, all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting how, office really got hurt during COVID, but now it's kind of coming back. We're up at the Scorpion building this morning, and then they got a lot of area that was for sublease because a lot of their people work remotely with Zoom, all this kind of stuff. It's really an Amazon, drones, AI. It's I don't think anybody knows what it's going to look like. I really don't. You can
Yeah.
say you, but I don't think anybody knows.
One thing you started to say before, and I've heard you say a number of times, is that going to being involved in charities and business groups, you go to networking events, but the networking events, because you've been a part of the community and part of these organizations for so long, your colleagues become your friends. So the lines between colleagues and clients and friends, it all starts to get blurred. But what that speaks to at a higher level is the durability of relationships, the commitment of a human being to another human being over time. And I would imagine that does pretty well. That's a pretty good currency in good times and bad. I could certainly attest to that. But I did want to ask you two related questions. The first part is what I call taking the L. I'd love, if you're willing, to tell me about one of your biggest losses or mistakes, whether it's over the course of your life or the different hats that you've worn professionally, and what did you learn from that?
Well, I have probably hundreds.
Yeah, like making me president at SCVVG.
Um, I don't know if I've making if it's mistakes or as much as missing opportunities.
Mm,
And there's no real mistake I've made in my life. Like I just like, what was that movie with the guy that was bowling and he missed the final kingpin or whatever?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't I don't really have any mistake like that, but I think I missed a lot of opportunities as I get older. I see a lot of, especially at my age, because as you mentioned, I am older than you. You see people that are your age, they're either retiring or they're dying, and it starts changing your perspective on life, trying to, like, I don't want to retire, but I don't want to die. If I do, I just want to die fast. I don't want to, so I think some of the missed opportunities when I was younger, I could have bought, I had a time when I had real good money where I should have bought a bunch of rental properties instead of Porsches and, boats and stupid things like that. Um, I think I could have done better in some of the stuff that has come. I mean, at doing commercial real estate, I've had multiple opportunities to buy properties, and one of them we was too chicken to actually buy it, but I told the guy like, you buy it, and anything you sell it, I'll sell it for whatever I sell it for, then we'll split the difference instead of a commission. And he made like I made him like 4 or 5 times his investment. It was a significant amount of money, and I got half of it for basically just coming up with the idea.
Yeah.
Those kind of things, those opportunities come along. But I see other people that own a lot of properties, but then I also watch them go broke when the economy changes and they're trying to sell them and they can't. So I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, for what it's worth, Warren Buffett once said his greatest mistakes weren't mistakes of commission, but mistakes of omission. Seeing opportunities that he knew were good ideas and letting others, however well-meaning they may have been, talk him out of what he knew to be good ideas. So the biggest mistakes he made were not mistakes of commission, but mistakes of omission. So the other side of that question is your secrets to success. So if you were talking to, say, a 28-year-old version of you, who's just embarking on, their adult life, their professional trajectory, this journey they're about to make, what are some of the habits they can develop, some of the traits that they can work on that would lead to success and joy and all the good things of life?
Well, I'm probably in a more unique position than a lot of people because having done commercial real estate for years, you're around a lot of people with money. And a lot of people immediately think that if you're the money is your measure of success. And I've seen people that have 100 times the amount of money that I do that have been divorced 5 times. They're absolutely miserable. And I've seen people with 100 times the amount of money that I have that are the best people on earth. They just are so happy. And so I think for a 28-year-old person, what makes you happy? I mean, if you just, I think that's the critical thing because financially, my wife and I, we do great. I'm not complaining. We could do better, but we're happy. We are so happy. We just went and saw the solar eclipse out and went to Costa Rica and through the Panama Canal and Colombia and Cayman Islands. And then we came back, then we went to Atlanta for the Boys and Girls Club annual retreat. Then Memorial Day weekend, we went four-wheeling with a bunch of friends for 3 days out in the desert, just camping. That I think, you have to find, I guess if I have to summarize it, is find your definition of success first. If your definition of, to me, money has always just been a means to do the things I want to do. Not like, and I know so many people that their focus is just making the money to the day they die. They don't enjoy the money. They just make it. And other people, that doesn't work for everybody. I mean, some people make money and they're all completely happy as well. But I would say just go back to what, if I really wanted to be a great guitar player. I wanted to be, like in reach and be in like Slash or be in some big rock band or something like that. But then I look back, my friends that did that, I know a lot of them, and some of them had a good success. Some of them are dead. Some of them are, broke and can't do anything else. I think you just have to find yourself and just be true to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, one of the one time a couple years ago that I saw you play, you were playing something altogether different. There's this guy. He actually, I don't know if he still lives here. He grew up in Germany, but he was living over in Valverde for a while. He might still be there. His name is Thomas Lieb, and he's one of maybe 5 or 6 musicians that play a style of guitar. If you've ever seen the movie August Rush, it's just getting
Yeah.
a whole different level of sound and rhythm. And so I really respected, that's just a whole different level. And you were still working on your craft to be able to elicit, just a whole different level of music and sound from that instrument. So I really respect, your willingness to experiment and try and put yourself out there. Um, One of my last questions is, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. Did you cut your hair?
I did. I did. It was overdue. I grew it. So I had the lockdown locks, and I started growing it out. Actually, for whatever reason, before we went into lockdown during the pandemic, I hadn't cut my hair for like 2 or 3 months. And I usually, when I was cutting it, once every month and a half or whatever, like normal guys. And then during the pandemic, I was just like, I had long hair when I first met Lisa for about 2 years. And with the shape of my head and the style, like the way my hair is, it's very like I just, once I was able to tie it back into a ponytail, it was just much more manageable. But I was getting kind of tired of it. So it's been about whatever it's been, 4 years, 5 years. And I figured I got to look presentable here, pretend I'm a grown up here for a second. So that's the only question you got for me, man. Okay, fine, that's fine.
All the other questions we won't be able to do on this podcast
Not
because
on
we're
this
we're
program.
going to get back into religion and politics.
Yeah, we'll have to crack open a bottle of wine, good wine, and get into it. Or maybe I'll have you in what do they call it? In disguise, or anonymously on my big program. So we can definitely do it. But so before we go, how can folks follow you, find more information about SCV Real Estate, and send in complaints to Burrtec? I guess. No, what's the best way to keep up with all the great work you and Pam are doing?
Well, Burrtec, I run a small portion of Burrtec, which is a big company. So I just run the Santa Clarita Valley, but we go from Bakersfield to San Diego. So our website is just burrtec.com/SCV, like Santa
Okay,
Clarita Valley. And so that's easy. And the real estate, we don't really promote it. It's just on Facebook, SCV Commercial. And you can add me as a friend, Dennis Verner, on Facebook. That's about it. And see all of our little trips that we go on and that kind of
awesome. That's great. Any big events, any big charity events that we should keep an eye out for coming up
stuff.
this summer or fall?
Well, we just did the Boys and Girls Club auction. Just that was Saturday. That was a big event. The Tiki Hideaway, that was exciting. We had 350 people there, sold out. Everybody loved it. It was great.
Good.
Pam's going to be doing the chairing the Circle of Hope tea. That's that event is going to be, I think, in September. And then other than that, we're going to hike Mount Whitney
Oh,
in
nice.
the 22nd. So there's a lot of training hikes on the weekends that we're going to be doing starting this Sunday.
Awesome. Sounds like you got a full calendar there, Dennis. But hopefully we'll be able to squeeze in some time for what is it? What's your Justin Cab? Is that the one that you like? Good go
Yep.
to.
Yeah, I like Austin Hope too.
Okay. All right. We'll have to try. I haven't tried the Austin Hope, so we'll have to try that next time. So we'll crack one open. But anytime I get to talk to you for a few minutes, it's always a good time, Dennis. I really appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And as always, please remember to follow this show, rate and write a review. The reviews in particular really do help. It really helps us in the rankings. You've been listening to the Voices of Business, a Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce podcast. You can follow me at Corey S. Nathan. That's at Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, on all the socials. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Voices of Business.